There's one version of Titanic we have never seen until this morning.
That's right. Experts have used special technology to map the entire ship on the ocean floor and create its digital twin.
12,500 feet down, there is no light, there is no sound, there is only cold, pressure, and a ship that has been waiting in the dark for 113 years. Not a diver. No human has ever gone this deep inside her. A machine, threading its way through corridors that have not felt movement since the night she sank, past a doorway that has stayed sealed since 1912. But before we reveal what the new underwater drone discovered inside the Titanic, hit like and subscribe, because some of history's greatest secrets are only now beginning to surface. A team of engineers and marine scientists has just completed something no one has ever managed to pull off in over a century of exploring this wreck. Using a new generation of underwater drone, they have mapped the entire ship on the ocean floor, inch by inch, and built a complete digital twin of the Titanic as it exists today, 2.5 miles beneath the surface. What it found has shocked everyone, from marine biologists to historians. It wasn't just preserved furniture, it wasn't just forgotten luggage, it was something else, something that by every reasonable expectation of ocean decay should not still exist down there. Stay with this, because before we show you what was behind that door, you need to understand exactly how impossible it is that anything survives at that depth at all, and exactly how far this new mission had to go to find it. Descending into the tomb, the drone entered through a breach in the hull that divers have used for decades, but this time it wasn't hunting for a quick photo pass. It was there to document everything, room by room, in a level of detail nobody had attempted before. The first images came from the first-class promenade deck. A row of deck chairs lay toppled on their sides, coated in a century of fine silt, but recognizable, eerily, almost peacefully intact, as if a storm had just passed through rather than 100 years of ocean current. It's the smaller details that hit hardest, though. Inside one of the cabins, the drone's lights swept across a pair of leather shoes, resting side by side on the seabed floor, positioned as if their owner had simply stepped out of them and never come back. A few feet away, a porcelain doll sat propped against a pile of debris, its painted eyes staring out from a face that had somehow avoided being crushed under 2.5 miles of water pressure. Its dress, once white, had faded to a ghostly grey. From there, the drone ascended toward the space where the legendary grand staircase used to stand. The staircase itself is long gone, consumed decades ago by the same iron-eating microbes that are slowly dissolving the rest of the ship's structure. What's left in its place is a gaping, cavernous void, a dark wound cut straight through the heart of the vessel. But as the drone's lights swept the edges of that opening, something caught the beam and threw it back. Fragments of the ornate iron railings that once lined the staircase twisted and bent almost beyond recognition, but unmistakably still there. It was a jarring contrast, the absence of everything grand about the room next to the stubborn survival of a few small iron scraps that refused to disappear. Then the mission moved into territory nobody had properly documented before, a section of the ship the drone team had never had clean enough access to explore in this kind of detail. Squeezing through a partially collapsed doorway, the drone entered what appeared to be a steward's pantry. Here, everything changed. Stacks of plates still sat on their shelves, held in place by decades of fallen debris, packed in around them like a plaster cast. A rack of wine bottles, several of them still fully intact, lay half-buried in the silt nearby. The cold, oxygen-poor water in this section had slowed decay almost to a standstill, preserving a scene that looked less like a shipwreck and more like a room somebody had simply walked out of and locked behind them. And then the camera caught something that made the entire monitoring room lean toward their screens at once. Pinned beneath a fallen cabinet was what looked unmistakably like a leather-bound journal, sealed shut, untouched, its contents a complete unknown. An object like that, surviving in any readable form after more than 100 years on the ocean floor, is close to unheard of. And nobody on that mission was prepared for what it might mean if it could somehow still be intact inside. None of this came without risk. Every meter the drone advanced through those corridors was a calculated gamble. A wrong turn could snag its fiber optic tether on jagged rusted steel and strand it permanently inside the wreck. Stirring up too much sediment could throw up a blinding cloud that would leave the pilot flying completely blind in a maze of collapsing metal. Sections of ceiling and wall throughout the ship are one disturbance away from giving out entirely. Every movement you see in this footage is slow and deliberate for a reason. It's a careful, controlled dance between cutting-edge robotics and a 100-year-old tomb that could close around the machine at any moment. That first pass through the wreck was a success, but it left the team with more questions than answers. The impossible preservation in some rooms, the total collapse in others, and now a sealed, unreadable journal sitting at the center of it all. What the drone found deeper inside the ship went from mysterious to something else entirely. The machine itself. Before we go further into what this expedition found, you need to understand what actually made it possible, because the drone that explored the Titanic this time is not your average remote-controlled camera rig. It's one of the most advanced pieces of deep-sea engineering ever built, and in a lot of ways, it's the real protagonist of this story. The wreck of the Titanic sits at a depth of roughly 12,500 feet. At that depth, water pressure exceeds 6,000 pounds per square inch. To put that in terms that actually land, that's the equivalent of having 3 fully loaded pickup trucks stacked directly on top of every single inch of your body. Ordinary materials, ordinary electronics, ordinary camera housings would be crushed flat almost instantly. To survive down there, the drone's outer shell is forged from a specialized titanium alloy, the same class of material used in deep-sea military submersibles and spacecraft components. It's built to be extraordinarily strong while staying light enough to remain maneuverable. The camera lens itself sits behind several inches of synthetic sapphire, a material chosen specifically because it can withstand crushing pressure without distorting the image on the other side of it. What most people overlook is the power and communication system running the whole operation. The drone stays connected to the surface support ship through a tether that stretches for miles. Not a simple cable, but a bundle of fiber optic strands carrying real-time high-definition video up to the surface and electrical power back down to the drone's motors and lighting array. And the lighting matters more than people expect. At this depth, there is no light at all. Total, permanent darkness. The drone carries a bank of high-output LED panels capable of throwing a beam of pure white light more than 100 feet, cutting through water that has never once seen the sun. But brighter isn't automatically better down here. If the lights are angled or intensified incorrectly, they illuminate the constant drift of marine snow, tiny particles of organic debris suspended in the water column, turning them into a blinding, swirling blizzard that can completely wash out the camera. Pilots have to constantly fine-tune the intensity and angle of every light source, and getting it right is closer to an art form than a fixed setting. Then there's the challenge of actually moving through the wreck. The interior of the Titanic is a maze of collapsed decking, hanging cable, and jagged, rusted steel edges that can shred conventional equipment in seconds. To navigate that kind of environment, this drone uses a system of 12 independent thrusters positioned around its entire body, not the simple four-rotor layout you'd picture from a typical drone. That configuration lets it move in absolutely any direction: up, down, sideways, forward, backward, and rotate in place with pinpoint precision, all without needing to turn its whole body around in a hallway that barely has room for it to begin with. On the surface, the pilots controlling it work from a station that looks like something out of a science fiction control room. Joysticks, banks of monitors running multiple simultaneous camera feeds, and constant sensor readouts tracking everything from tether tension to water temperature. But the single most striking piece of technology on this mission is the AI system running quietly in the background the entire time. While a human pilot remains in control at all times, an onboard artificial intelligence continuously uses an array of sonar sensors to build a real-time, three-dimensional map of everything immediately surrounding the drone. If the pilot drifts too close to a wall, a support beam, or a piece of hanging debris, the AI automatically fires the appropriate thrusters to correct course before a collision can happen, acting as a second set of reflexes that can react faster than any human operator possibly could. That system is the difference maker. It's what makes it possible to thread hallways barely wider than the drone itself without losing the machine forever inside a 100-year-old wreck. This isn't just a camera on a stick. It's closer to a sentient explorer, a robotic ghost, quietly wandering the corridors of a ship that has been empty of human presence for generations. That machine is what gave us the footage, but what it documented is about to rewrite parts of Titanic history that historians thought were already settled. Rewriting the wreck for decades, everything we understood about the interior of the Titanic came from a patchwork of external photographs and low-resolution sonar sweeps. We had a reasonably solid picture of the outside of the ship. The inside was essentially a black box, a puzzle historians and engineers could only guess at from the outside in. This new mission changes that completely, because the footage isn't just being watched, it's being used to build the first truly comprehensive, three-dimensional interior map of the wreck ever created. Using a technique called photogrammetry, computers process thousands of high-resolution images captured by the drone, calculating distances and angles between every visible surface to construct a precise digital model of the ship as it exists today. The result is a full digital twin of the Titanic. And that model is already revealing details about the ship's final moments and its century of slow decay that nobody had confirmed before. Take the breakup of the ship itself. The long-standing popular account has always been that the Titanic broke cleanly into two large sections as it went down. But the new interior mapping tells a messier story. Footage from deep inside the stern section shows extensive structural failure and tearing patterns that suggest the ship wasn't so much split as it was twisted and torn apart under enormous, uneven force. What was previously overlooked in older surveys were the internal stress points. the places where support beams and interior walls absorb the worst of that violence. Engineers are now feeding this new structural data into updated simulations of the sinking itself, producing a picture of the ship's final minutes that is considerably more chaotic and more violent than the version most people grew up picturing. That inconsistency runs throughout the new model. Rooms that earlier surveys assumed were completely destroyed are turning out to be partially intact once you can actually see inside them clearly. Meanwhile, other sections long assumed to be structurally stable are shown for the first time to be right on the edge of total collapse. One of the most striking findings to come out of this new mapping data is just how fast the wreck is deteriorating. Comparing the new high-resolution scans against older, lower-detail surveys from previous decades, researchers have found that decay is progressing considerably faster than earlier estimates suggested. Features once considered permanent fixtures of the wreck are already gone or going. The captain's bathtub, a detail famous from earlier expeditions, has reportedly collapsed through the deteriorating floor beneath it. The main mast has crumbled. Entire sections of exterior decking are peeling away in sheets. The primary culprit is a specific strain of iron-consuming bacteria that forms delicate, icicle-like structures known as rusticles, which are slowly but steadily eating through what remains of the ship's steel hull. This same three-dimensional mapping is also opening up new possibilities for the mysteries the mission uncovered along the way, including that sealed journal found wedged beneath the fallen pantry cabinet. Using the digital model, researchers can now study that exact room and the way the debris settled around it without sending another physical drone pass anywhere near the fragile object itself. They can trace exactly how the cabinet fell, map the surrounding debris field in precise detail, and begin planning a future, carefully engineered retrieval mission with the goal of minimizing any risk to the surrounding structure. It's the closest thing to a virtual archaeological dig that's ever been possible on this wreck, a level of planning precision that simply did not exist even a few years ago. But the mapping data didn't only confirm things, it also turned up something nobody could immediately explain. The anomaly. Deep inside one of the Titanic's cargo holds, the drone's advanced sonar and high-resolution cameras detected something that immediately caught the attention of the research team. It doesn't match anything listed on the ship's original cargo manifest, and it doesn't appear on any of the surviving blueprints of the Titanic. The object is large, unusually shaped, and almost completely buried beneath more than a century of sediment that has slowly settled across the wreck. Because so much of it remains hidden beneath the seafloor, the footage alone isn't enough to reveal exactly what it is. For now, its true shape and purpose remain a mystery. As the data was reviewed, theories began spreading among the scientists, engineers, and historians involved in the mission. One possibility is that it's simply a heavy piece of machinery or cargo equipment that broke free during the Titanic's violent descent to the ocean floor. After all, when the ship broke apart and sank, countless objects were thrown from their original positions before finally coming to rest in different parts of the wreck. But not everyone is convinced that's the explanation. Some members of the team believe the object doesn't resemble anything officially documented as being on board the Titanic. Its size, shape, and location don't neatly match any known equipment or cargo recorded in the historical records. That doesn't automatically make it extraordinary, but it does raise questions that no one can answer yet. And that's exactly what makes this discovery so fascinating. The researchers aren't claiming they've uncovered some lost artifact or solved one of the Titanic's greatest mysteries. In fact, they're doing the opposite. They're openly acknowledging that they don't yet know what they're looking at. Sometimes the most important scientific discoveries begin with a question instead of an answer. The new three-dimensional digital map has become much more than a detailed reconstruction of the wreck. It isn't just confirming what historians already knew. Instead, it's revealing places that deserve a closer look and highlighting gaps in our understanding that nobody even realized existed before this mission. Whatever this mysterious object eventually turns out to be, it serves as a powerful reminder that the Titanic is still far from giving up all of its secrets. More than 113 years after the disaster, and despite decades of expeditions, countless dives, and years of research, there are still parts of the wreck that remain unexplored, undocumented, and unexplained. And that realization brings us to the next, and perhaps the most thought-provoking part of this story. A grave, not a wreck. Exploring the Titanic is not like exploring an ancient ruin sitting empty on dry land. This is a grave site. More than 1,500 men, women, and children lost their lives when this ship went down, and for over a century, the deep ocean has stood as the only thing guarding their final resting place. The drone's journey through the wreck brought back an extraordinary amount of new knowledge. It also reopened a set of ethical questions that have followed this ship since the day it was first rediscovered. How do you balance the pursuit of discovery against basic respect for the dead? That debate has never fully gone away, but this new, far more intimate footage has made it feel more urgent than it has in years. The team behind this mission has been open about the emotional weight of what they were doing. More than one person involved has described the sensation of feeling like a trespasser inside a sacred space, even while operating a machine from a control room thousands of feet above the wreck. Before the expedition even launched, the team consulted with maritime historians, professional archaeologists, and descendants of Titanic survivors and victims. The consensus that came out of those conversations was clear. This mission needed to be conducted as an act of documentation and remembrance, not simple treasure hunting. That meant firm rules going in. The drone was never permitted to physically touch anything inside the wreck, and it was deliberately programmed to maintain a respectful distance from any area where human remains might reasonably be present. Public reaction to the footage has been split, and that split is worth sitting with. Most viewers have responded with fascination, a genuine sense of connection to a tragedy that has captured public imagination for well over a century. But for descendants of the victims specifically, seeing personal items surface on camera, a suitcase, a pair of shoes, a child's toy sitting exactly where it was left, can be an intensely painful reminder of a loss that, for their family, was never really abstract history to begin with. Many of them describe feeling caught between two competing instincts: the desire to see and understand more about what happened to their relatives, and the feeling that this resting place deserves to be left in peace rather than documented for an audience. There's no clean resolution to that tension, and you can see it play out constantly across public discussion of every new piece of Titanic footage that surfaces. Complicating all of this further is a legal reality that surprises a lot of people the first time they hear it. The Titanic wreck is not protected the way a traditional cemetery or memorial site would be. It sits in international waters, which has led to a long and genuinely complicated history involving salvage rights, tourism dives, and ongoing scientific exploration, with no single governing body holding full authority over what happens to the site or anything inside it. Some organizations argue strongly for preserving the wreck exactly as it stands, treating it purely as an underwater maritime memorial. Others argue that valuable historical artifacts, including potentially that sealed journal sitting in the pantry, should be recovered and preserved in museums before accelerating decay destroys them permanently. This new footage, showing just how much faster the wreck is deteriorating than previously understood, has only sharpened that disagreement. Some now argue there's a closing window to recover anything meaningful at all. Others believe the ship and everything still inside it should simply be allowed to return to the ocean, undisturbed, the way it has been for most of the last century. The team behind this mission has said they wrestled with that exact dilemma every time something deeply personal surfaced on their screens. A locket, a shoe, that porcelain doll with its faded dress and unblinking painted eyes. Their eventual decision was to present this footage in a way that centers the human story and the scale of the tragedy, rather than framing the mission around technology or treasure. It was a deliberate choice to turn the exploration itself into an act of remembrance rather than spectacle. But the line between respectful documentation and something closer to intrusion is a thin one, and reasonable people watching this same footage land on very different sides of it. This new chapter in the Titanic's long, strange afterlife is only just beginning, and it leaves us with a question that doesn't have an easy answer. Should missions like this one continue, pushing deeper into this wreck with more advanced technology every year, recovering what we can before the ocean takes it for good? Or is it time to accept that this is a grave, not an archive, and let the ocean keep whatever secrets it hasn't given up yet? What do you think should happen to that sealed journal, retrieved and preserved, or left exactly where it's rested for over a century? And what about that unexplained object in the cargo hold, worth the risk of a closer look, or better left buried? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more journeys into the unknown.